Welcome, friend. Follow me. We're going somewhere dark, somewhere dangerous. Most people would never dare enter the place we are going. There's no telling what horrors we'll find, what terrors we'll uncover. Don't say I didn't warn you. We might discover terrible monsters lurking there. Be careful, they could follow you out, or maybe they're already inside you. Are you afraid? Good. Now you are ready to enter the Warning Woods. Philip Summer took his daughter Ophelia to play at her elementary school playground almost every night. He especially made a point to do this during the weeks leading up to winter when he knew their days of being able to play outside at all were numbered. Soon it would be dark by 5, and snow and ice would render the playground equipment unusable. However, those days were still a few weeks off, and for now Philip could enjoy walking in the crisp, revitalizing air behind his daughter as she rode her bike to the school only a couple of blocks from their house. "Daddy, come tell me what pizza you want," Ophelia yelled to him on this particular night. Philip had lost himself in the sunset for a minute. Its pinkish-orange light cast surreal shadows and made him feel temporarily like he was standing on another planet, a planet without worries or stress. "Oh, we're playing Pizza Shop?" he called to his daughter, looking toward the short structure with various spinning features Ophelia liked to pretend were the buttons and knobs of a pizza oven. She stood behind it, beaming at him, nodding her head, bouncing her bobbed hair excitedly. He could never understand quite why she got such a kick out of these simple games, but they meant the world to her, and he always obliged, no matter his own mood. Given the choice between ordering a pizza with bananas and pickles or one simply called cake pizza, Philip chose the latter. He scarfed it down noisily and licked his fingers clean. Ophelia laughed the whole time, and when he finished, she said, "You didn't even notice I gave you the bananas pickles one instead." Since there were no other parents around to embarrass himself in front of, Philip made a Shakespearean drama out of the fake barfing fest with which he responded to his daughter's trick. It ended with him attempting to run toward one of the trash cans next to the basketball court and knocking his head, all pretend of course, against one of the gymnastics bars. He hit it with his fist to make it ring out for good measure. This caused Ophelia to fall over laughing. While recovering, he looked once more toward the sun and saw it had fallen lower faster than he expected. If they didn't leave soon, they'd be walking home in the dark, which was fine, except Ophelia felt nervous riding her bike at night, so he would probably end up having to carry it for her. "All right, kiddo, time to close up the pizza shop and head home," he told her. Ophelia whined, "Aw, okay." She went back in her shop to begin turning everything off. Unintentionally and for no particular reason, Philip looked at the school across the basketball court. His thoughts were nowhere near it, but his eyes naturally drifted toward the single window along the side of the building that glowed with light. It illuminated a colorful classroom. In it, a janitor was stacking chairs upside down on top of the desks, presumably to mop the floor. From so far away, Philip couldn't tell, but guessed the janitor was wearing headphones because between lifting chairs he danced like he was on stage with the Backstreet Boys. Philip looked away, embarrassed like he'd walked in on someone using the bathroom. The janitor, a middle-aged bald man with a long white beard, didn't appear to Philip like someone who danced when he knew others were watching. Philip started turning away when something caught his eye in the next window over. He thought he'd seen a lab coat or paint smock hanging on the back of a door or something like that, but an alarm bell rang in his mind. He traced his sight back to the shape and saw not an empty smock, but another person staring back at him from the dark classroom's doorway. Lit only by the faint traces of light bleeding into the hallway from the room the janitor was cleaning, the figure of a woman in a flowing maxi dress stood facing the window. Although startled, Philip's first reaction was to wave at the woman, who he felt pretty sure was staring directly at him. She did not wave back. "Hey, do you know her? Is she one of your teachers?" Philip, turning, asked Ophelia. Her shop stood abandoned. Throat tense, Philip called, "Ophelia," but then he saw her, walking up to her bluey bike parked next to the basketball court. He'd been so transfixed by the woman in the dark, he missed his daughter walking by. And he felt so nervous. Why did he feel so nervous? "What, Dad?" she asked, swinging one leg over her bike. "Oh, nothing," Philip replied. He looked at the window again, but the woman was gone. He spied on the janitor's intensifying dance for a few seconds before turning to leave. But something wouldn't let him. He'd seen something again. Just as he'd looked away, he'd noticed something he didn't fully register or didn't initially want to believe. He couldn't quite make sense of his own mind, it seemed. "Hey, kiddo, go ahead and bike home. I'll be right behind you in a minute." He heard the click of her helmet strap before she asked, "Why?" "Just go ahead, I'll catch up," Philip casually yelled before he started jogging up to the lit window. Standing just outside the classroom, behind the oblivious janitor, the woman lurked in the hallway's shadows, this time with a broad smile across her face. It might have looked friendly. Philip may have even said pretty, if not for the two bulging orbs protruding in place of her eyes, reflecting the yellowish light from the room. Those eyes, plus the broad smile, looked sinisterly murderous, and she was staring at the unwitting janitor who Philip could now see, indeed, wore headphones. Philip ran up to the glass and smacked at the window, shouting, "Hey!" The janitor jumped so suddenly his headphones fell onto a nearby desk. He threw his mop handle down hard and stormed over to the window. "What's your problem, man? School's closed. There ain't nobody here to help you with anything, and I ain't letting you in." "There's somebody behind you," Philip yelled through the glass. "Huh? Can't hear you," the scowling janitor replied. Philip pointed at the upper panels of the window where he could see latches. He yelled, "Open the window, I think you're in danger." The whole time, the woman, whose black hair and green dress remained mostly cloaked in the darkness, whose only visible features were those which reflected the room's light, her eyes and her teeth, remained hidden in the hallway. The janitor shrugged and cracked open the window. "What is it? I've got a lot to do." Philip yelled, "There's a woman in the hallway." The janitor turned around, seemingly unalarmed. Philip looked at the hallway again, too. "You on something, man?" the janitor asked. "No, I swear," Philip began to say, but he knew finishing his sentence would only serve to make him look like a bigger idiot or more crazy. In the hallway, an emergency light fixture with two outwardly pointed lamps and a motion sensor strip, which looked a lot like a row of teeth, reflected the light from the room back at them. "Guess it does sort of look like a face, don't it?" asked the janitor. "Guess it does," Philip remarked. But he knew the almost comical face the lights made were not what he'd seen before. "I thought you'd seen Miss Williams," said the janitor, who Philip now saw had a name tag, Alan. "Is she a teacher?" asked Philip. He knew the principal and the superintendent as well as a few of the teachers, so a teacher he'd never met was his best guess. "Used to be. Years ago," said Alan. He leaned closer to the window and said, "That is, until she fell down the basement stairs just at the beginning of summer vacation. She laid down there for days before anyone found her. These days, she's known to come creeping up those stairs at night looking for her students. I can hear her crying in the hallways some nights. And you know what else?" "What?" asked Philip, his nose practically touching the window. "Sometimes I hear her." "Ah!" Philip jumped, practically fell backward as Alan doubled over with a laugh that gave a hoot and a holler a legitimate meaning in Philip's mind. When he recovered, he asked, "Did you just make that up?" Shaking his head and beaming with pride, Alan said, "Man, I got you good. Yeah, I made it up. Anyway, look, I guess I appreciate you looking out for me, but..." "Yeah, sorry," was all Philip could muster in response. Alan closed the window and, surprisingly, went right on dancing. He apparently didn't care if Philip saw after all. Philip thought. Probably because he thinks I'm nuts. He walked across the basketball court slowly, looking downward, trying to make sense of what he'd seen or thought he'd seen. What's wrong with me? He muttered aloud. Why did that man yell at you? Ophelia's voice caught him off guard. She was straddling her Bluey bike right where she'd been when he ran off. Why didn't you go home? He asked, fighting against the frustration that wanted to flow out with his voice. Ophelia said, I've never done it alone before, and it's dark, and I'm scared of the dark. Yeah, sighed Philip. Yeah, that's fair. I'm sorry I asked you to do that. It's okay, Daddy, but are you all done now? I need to go potty. Yeah, kiddo, let's get you to the potty. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. You know, I'm looking here at, Josh Allen for 27.5 rush yards. I'm going to go more. Or Dalton Kincaid for 30.5 receiving yards. I've got a friend who's a Bills superfan. I might check with him about that one. Let's see if I can even outperform last week's picks. PrizePicks also offers injury reboots. If one of your players leaves the game in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks won't count it as a loss. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money, even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Download the app today and use code WARNINGWOODS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code WARNINGWOODS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Janessa Summer, Philip's wife, came downstairs after putting Ophelia to bed. Hey, she said, sliding in next to him on the couch where he sat with his laptop open. Hey, he replied with only a partial glance and a smile her way. What's wrong with you? She asked. Huh? Philip looked up, shutting his laptop. Jessa, I'm sorry, I was just focused on... Janessa, or Jessa, as Philip had always called her, started laughing. She slid closer to him and said, Ophelia just asked me why you thought something was wrong with you. Oh, she just heard me mumbling to myself at the park, he replied. Oh, I know, she told me what happened. So what really happened? She said something about you yelling at a teacher? Jeez, no, Philip laughed. It felt good. It was a janitor, and I wasn't yelling at him. I was yelling to him. It's a weird story, actually. I thought I saw... Actually, did Ophelia say anything about anyone else she saw? Cocking an eyebrow, Janessa shook her head. Well, there was a woman, too. I thought I saw a woman, at least. But she didn't... Something about her just wasn't right. Philip proceeded to tell in full detail the story of what happened at the school, dancing janitor and all. He ended by reiterating his certainty that the face he saw leering in the hallway belonged to the woman from the dark classroom and not the emergency lights. He explained how, even though he couldn't really see much, he'd at least been able to see the vague outline of her hair and the form of her dress as well as her face. When he finished, Janessa blew loudly through her lips and said, Sounds like something right out of a scary movie. She looked like something right out of a scary movie, Philip replied. Janessa looked at him, cold and steely, and said, Yeah, don't you think it's a bit on the nose? What do you mean? She softened a little as she shrugged. I mean, it could just be that you did just see a weird trick of the light and your brain filled in the details with stuff you've seen in movies. I don't know, it's just the creepy smiling woman is such a trope, you know? So just because something's a trope, it can't be real? Philip asked. Janessa replied, I didn't say that, but it does make it easier to explain away for me, I guess. What you're describing sounds like something right out of a Henry James story. Who? Asked Philip. Oh my God, Philip, read a book. In fact, what time is it? I'm beat. I'm ready to turn in. Can you forget about this for long enough to get some sleep? Reading something might help. I'd recommend Turn of the Screw, but maybe not tonight. Sure, I could sleep, said Philip. Sleep toyed with him, though, luring him in just to run away like a rude child playing a cruel game. It took him over an hour to fall asleep, then he woke less than an hour later. After that, he never remembered falling asleep again, but he did remember looking at the clock and noticing leaps in time that implied he drifted off for at least some of it. He saw the clock at 11:42, 12:58, 1:37. Finally, when he woke feeling almost painfully tired and saw 2:29, he knew he couldn't keep laying there, letting sleep tease him any longer. He got out of bed and tried using the bathroom, then sipped some water at the kitchen sink. He hoped being up and about would prove to his brain that it was tired and needed to shut down for a while. But his brain took advantage of him being up to whisper more questions about what had happened at the school. He had a bad feeling about what he'd seen, and he couldn't shake it. His mind wouldn't let him, and after standing at the kitchen sink staring out the window at the waxing moon for nearly 15 minutes, his body wouldn't either. His calves and ankles started to tingle with excitement at the prospect of a late-night adventure, even before he officially decided, I have to go back. He thought if he could just see the school, dark, empty, and spiritless, see that the janitor had left unharmed, he could come home and sleep peacefully. He would be back in less than 20 minutes, probably in less time than he'd spent putzing around since getting out of bed. 20 minutes seemed a reasonable price for a peace of mind, even though deep down he knew he was being irrational. He didn't even believe in ghosts, really. Perhaps that's why it bothered him so much that he'd seen one. 7 minutes later, Philip turned the corner to walk up the path between two houses to the playground wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants he pulled out of the dryer. There hadn't been any socks in the load, so he'd slipped into his sandals on his way out the door. This meant his feet felt quite cold by the time he reached the dark school, yet somehow they became even colder after he laid eyes on it. As expected, all the lights were now off except the red glow from the exit sign above the glass back door. It lit the first few feet of the hallway, but everything beyond it hid in the shadows. Due to the moonlight, Philip could see rows of knickknacks and crafts lining some of the classroom windows, but could see nothing beyond them. He decided to stroll around the building's perimeter just to ensure everything looked okay, nothing out of place. He hoped a full look at the school would soothe him because, so far, despite there being no visible ghost, visiting the school again had only fueled his unease. This was his daughter's school, a place of learning and laughter, of friendship, and those early memories which can shape so much of who a person will become. He hated how it made him feel to look upon it now as a building of shadow and fear. Maybe, he thought, it's just the night that's to blame. He approached the back door. He gave the handle a small tug, gentle enough that it wouldn't look like he was trying to force the door open if anyone was watching the cameras. He let go as soon as he knew the door was locked. He'd assumed it would be, but also felt a strong suggestion that his expectations might not match reality that night. He began his walk around the building, peering into windows, and thinking the whole time he would certainly have called the police if he saw anyone doing what he was currently doing. He needed to be fast. He doubted anyone in the sleepy houses surrounding the school was awake at the moment, but he couldn't be certain. He walked up to the first window through which he'd seen the woman and all but pressed his face against the glass. At first he saw nothing. Then a faint flicker in the shadows of the furthest corner of the room caught his attention. A face, the same he'd seen earlier, rotated toward him. All he could really make out were its reflective eyes, two perfectly round orbs protruding from its shrouded head. Philip took an involuntary step backward. The woman stepped forward. Remaining mostly masked in darkness, she slowly revealed more of herself to him. She no longer wore the same maxi dress as before. She now wore a long-sleeved t-shirt with a fleece vest and blue jeans. Her hair hung loose behind her shoulders, and it was red. Philip couldn't speak. He couldn't move. He could only watch as the woman, apparently a different woman than before, turned and walked toward the classroom's open door. Only after she entered the hallway could he finally move. He observed her walking toward the next classroom over, the same the janitor had been cleaning earlier, and he hurried over to that window. She was already there, standing in the doorway, but now she was he. A large, bald man's figure silhouetted by the red light in the hallway faced Philip with the same round, reflective eyes protruding from his indistinct face. This time, he did not move toward Philip. He didn't enter the classroom at all. Once he knew he had Philip's attention, he turned once more and began walking again. Bulging eyes aside, Philip thought he recognized this man. He looked eerily like one of the teachers at the school that he'd met before. This time, there wasn't a neighboring window for Philip to hurry toward. The building protruded about 20 feet from the wall he currently stood next to make room for the gymnasium, which had no ground floor windows. The only windows along the gym's wall were narrow rectangles roughly 10 feet off the ground. He rounded the corner, having already given up on seeing the shape-shifting spirit again before it moved into another part of the building, but he discovered a trash can directly below one of the high windows. If he was careful not to slip through the big hole in the top, he thought he could stand on the trash can to see inside. At this point, he knew if anyone was watching him, they would surely have called the cops, but that was fine since he'd already been debating doing so himself. The only reason he hadn't was he realized he'd left his phone by his bedside at home. Once on top of the trash can, he precariously raised himself to a standing position. He still had to get on his tiptoes to see through the window. What he saw made him jerk back. One of his feet did slip into that hole, and he only managed to catch himself without breaking his leg because the bin was full of trash which compressed and kept him mostly upright. He paused to catch his breath, one foot still standing on garbage that smelled overwhelmingly of banana peels. He felt he had to take another look, but he didn't want to. He wasn't sure he could. Standing on the gymnasium floor, staring directly up at him, he'd seen not the large, bald man, not the woman in the fleece vest, nor the one in the maxi dress. He'd seen an entire class's worth of children, second or third graders by the look of it, all staring up at him with blank faces and those protruding eyes. Due to the windows all around the gym, enough moonlight filled it to illuminate their small bodies. They were all facing the window he looked through, and all of them had waved at him in sync. When he finally summoned the courage to stand back up and look through the window once more, the children were no longer facing it. They had all lined up at the gym door, which he did not think had been open before. He watched them all file into the hallway beneath the red glow of another exit sign. Philip scrambled down from the trash can and sprinted along the wall until he found another ground floor window. He looked in. It was another classroom with no lights on. It looked similar to his daughter's classroom, but with enough difference to make him certain it was not hers. The door was closed, but through its vertical slit of double glass, he saw a shadow of movement moving further down the hallway. He jogged to the next window, the first facing the parking lot. He felt sure this one would look into Ophelia's classroom. He'd seen it many times before. He'd only ever viewed it from inside, of course, but he remembered the window looking out on cars parked in the front lot. If he saw the spirit or spirits in his daughter's classroom, he was going to run straight home, run faster than he had since he was a child, and call the cops, and maybe even a priest. He was going to send emails to the principal, the superintendent, every teacher he had contact information for, to warn them. He was going to call the school in the morning to follow up and make sure everyone was aware that some latent evil lurked inside its walls and threatened the safety of everyone, especially the children within. If he watched that thing walk into Ophelia's classroom, her home away from home, her sanctuary, but the spirit was already there, waiting. He didn't see it at first because the classroom was so dark, even darker than the others because the moon hung low in the sky on the other side of the building. On this side, the single light in the parking lot offered the only illumination, and it didn't fully reach the building. But similar to how the ghost caught his attention in the first room, A slight shimmer alerted Philip to movement at one of the desks. It came from the second row near the right side of the room. He knew that desk. Ophelia's desk. There, sitting in Ophelia's chair, Philip saw the hazy silhouette of a little girl. His fear compressed into a new emotion: anger. He pounded the window with both palms and shouted at the girl sitting at his daughter's desk. She sat with perfect posture and with her back to the window. The back of her hair that looked identical to Ophelia's current bob, faced Philip. At the sound of his voice, the girl did not react. However, seconds later, she casually pushed her chair away from her desk and stood. She held her neck straight as she performed these movements, only turning her face with her entire body as if controlled by a puppet master. Philip knew whose face he would see before she completed her rotation. He'd known the moment he saw her sitting at Ophelia's desk. The little girl standing in the classroom, lit only by the faintest bleeding light from the parking lot, looked identical to Ophelia, with one glaring difference. Her imaginative, curious, playful, loving brown eyes had been replaced with two reflective, protruding orbs. "Not her!" Philip screamed, slamming the glass again. "If you do anything to her, I swear to God I'll..." A whooping siren drowned out his voice. Red and blue flashed on the window, washing out everything on the other side of it. Philip slammed the glass one last time because he felt so full of anger and frustration he might have hit the police officer who approached him instead if he didn't vent it on the window. Between flashes, he caught millisecond glimpses of Ophelia's empty desk. The spirit, which had stolen her form, had disappeared. The police let him go after holding him in the parking lot to answer questions. They called Janessa for him, saying they could not just release him back into the night. She answered the phone scared and hung up angry, but for Philip it was either face the wrath of his wife or go to jail. He couldn't have cared less about how Janessa felt being woken up anyway. He cared much more that she had to wake up Ophelia too and bring her to the parking lot to pick him up. He begged the officers to let him walk to the end of the block and have her pick him up there. He didn't want Ophelia on school property, as if such things as evil spirits respected such boundaries. They wouldn't let him out of the back of the cruiser he was locked in until Janessa arrived, though. After listening to the officer's explanation for why her husband was picked up at the school in sandals and without his phone, Janessa was curious to hear Philip's version of the story. He didn't want to tell her in front of Ophelia, though, so after they put their daughter back to sleep with promises to explain everything in the morning, they went downstairs and he told her everything. "Jessa, I don't think we can send her back there. You know no one's going to believe me. They won't do anything about it. You probably don't even believe me. Do I sound crazy? I feel crazy." "I don't believe you, but I trust you," Janessa replied. "Something's obviously making you feel this way for a reason, and if you'd feel more comfortable keeping Ophelia home tomorrow, I'm okay with it as long as you take the day off to be with her." "I will," he said. "And I know nobody will take me seriously, but I'm going to call the school too. I'm not sure what they can even do to keep all those kids safe from what I know I saw, but at least I just don't want them to be totally blindsided." "By what? Ghosts?" Janessa asked. Philip answered with a helpless shrug. "Ghosts or whatever creates them." You made it out. Congratulations. If you enjoyed the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For early, ad-free episodes and behind-the-scenes episodes I call Into the Woods, become a patron at patreon.com/thewarningwoods. You can also support the show by purchasing merch. The merch store and Patreon links are in this episode's description. To stay up to date, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at The Warning Woods. And when you feel ready, meet me here for another journey into the Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.